Staying with water, the African Farmers Association of South Africa saying it supports the decision by the Water Affairs Department to implement a water licensing system that would require farms to be black-owned if they want to use large amounts of water from our rivers and dams. Under the proposed system, to get a water license, a farm or a company that owns the farm would have to be either 25%, 50% or 75% owned by black people, depending on how much water it wants to use. Afasa says that at the current situation is wrong, where just 7,000 farmers, who are almost all white, produce 80% of our agricultural produce. Keith Middleton is the chair of the Land and Water Committee for the African Farmers Association of South Africa. Keith, good afternoon. Thank you for your time. Why do you support this move by the Water Affairs Department?
Yes, Stephen, 100% we do support the move by the Minister, and I think it's well overdue. We actually been trying desperately over many years to try and transform the sector, especially the irrigation sector. Now, Stephen, I just want to add a bit of context. 26 years ago, the Honorable Minister Adar Kazmal had allocated 12,000 hectares of water rights for black farmer development. The last bit of that water was only taken up last year in the Free State and in the Northern Cape and the Eastern Cape. Now, Stephen, out of 12,000 hectares of water rights, we cannot show many commercial black farmers that have been developed. Our research shows us that that water has now once again gone into white hands, the commercial sector. And on further investigation, we find out that the commercial sector applies for the water using BEE or black people, and then before the projects start, they buy them out, giving them a pittance for the value of the water. And come on, let's face it, we're all going through tough times. And if someone comes and offers you 100,000 rand for 50 hectares of water, you know, people are tempted to sell that water. And as a result thereof, we are not able to produce black commercial farmers because of the very fact that I have mentioned. Now, with this attempt, Stephen, we've been lobbying for more water for black farmer development. And as part of the, what you call the master plan, the irrigation master plan, we set out a few milestones within that plan. And what we said is the new allocation of 19,500 hectares of water should be exclusively used for empowerment, and we want government to have mechanisms of monitoring and evaluating and not just leaving it to the business sector. So that is why the minister then came up with a plan that said, listen, let us then make it almost a compulsory thing of shareholding within companies. So, which is welcome by Afasa, but we're also saying that if we couldn't produce many commercial farmers out of 12,000, we wanted to ensure that with the 19,000, we would be at least been able to produce commercial farmers. Okay. And we're very dependent on existing commercial farmers to assist in the process, but obviously not using the process for self-enrichment.
Okay. As I understand it, and Keith, I'm going to ask you to help me with some of the technical stuff with this legislation, because it muddles my head a little bit. But there's sort of two different types of water. There is water which is already being used, so farms that are already using water. And there's unused water, maybe a better phrase is unallocated water. How do you understand, How do you understand the system? Would it mean that a farm that is white-owned, that is currently using a large amount of water, would no longer be able to use the water it's already using? Or does what the department is now going to implement only apply to the unused or unallocated water?
Okay, let me just explain further. You had Advocate Skosana just explaining it to you the other day, Stephen. He said the water that's been allocated, let's just put it in context, 60% of all of the irrigation sector uses 60% of all water allocations in South Africa. Out of that 60%, 90% of it is in white hands. So what we're talking about is that 10% that government is making available for black farmer development. The 12,000 I've just told you about, and an additional 19,500 hectares, right, or 450 hectares. So what we are saying is, we said, let's not disturb food security, though within the master plan, we did say we are wanting transfer of that water from, transfer of the water systematically into black hands, right? But for now, this is a new water allocation that government has now came up with for black farmer development. So it's this water that we're talking about. We're not disturbing the rest of the water, though we're cognizant of the fact that water was granted. They speak about the New Water Act of 1998. That was pre-democracy, and say the New Water Act. Because the thing is, we didn't even participate within that act. Though it has provision for transformation, we feel that the transformation has been rather slow. And remember, water being a national asset should be, and it's also an economic driver. This asset should be used for the broader good of all South Africans. Now, if 90% of it is already in white hands, and that little bit left over is now being distributed to black people, and we are still dependent on white people, on the commercial sector to help with that. So what we are saying is we welcome what the minister is doing because it's a radical move in terms of transforming the sector.
So it would sound...
However, we want to...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Keith, and I appreciate the explanation. But it would seem almost, from what you say, that this only affects sort of unallocated water. That government's not really moving enough because it's not really going to lead to transformation at all.
Well, put it like this here, Stephen. We are saying let us work with what we have. The transformation agenda, we have already put it within the agricultural master plan. What we said is we'd like 10% year on year to be transferred into black hands. But Stephen, we have a problem within the sector. Let me tell you, the water is not the problem. The water is there. We don't have land, irrigable land, high-valued irrigable land in order to carry out irrigation farming in South Africa. If you just look at the stats, you'll be shocked to know how many black irrigation farmers are in the country versus white irrigation farmers. And what we are saying is it's not surprising because when you allocated water within the source of the water. In other words, where the water is. It's very expensive to transport water long distances for irrigation purposes. So, large pieces of land along water courses are in private hands. And the Department of Agriculture has really failed us because we don't have access to that land because it's in private hands.
Keith Middleton, thank you very much indeed. Chair of the Land and Water Committee of the African Farmers Association of South Africa. Really appreciate the time.